Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This week we will be reviewing episode 7 of Incorporated, entitled The Executables. And as I have been saying week after week, guys, the show is just getting better and better. And I've become quite the supporter of the show. But this week's episode, I think, was the best. I think because as we move into episode 7, only 3 remaining episodes. It's really starting to heat up, and everything, all the story arcs that have been set up are now starting to come to a head. So as we open up in this week's episode, we get this Spiga Corporation celebration, and what it's about is it's about how they got their corporate sovereignty, how they were able to convince the American government that we can do a better job sovereign to help American citizens than the government can do. And so Amendment 29 was passed, and that's basically where they were given over this power to be separate, from the government and run their own corporate areas and divisions. So we also get this, it's like a propaganda piece, or it's like political, commercial, and they have basically people's citizens or people under the Spiga Corporation speaking on how their lives have been under this this change of this corporatism. And of course everybody on this commercial are only talking about the good things that Spiga has done. Nobody's addressing the all of the horrible things that have happened since this change, but also they kind of reflect back on how things were, how bad natural disasters had, gotten as the onslaught of global warming had taken place. And so basically, this is a memorial for that, a celebration event. But also, as we progress through the story, Elizabeth is still trying to locate the scientists who she was given information about from the defector from the Inazagi Corporation, who's able to use salt from the oceans to get crops to grow. He's figured out a way for salt, or rather the crops, to be salt tolerable, so that they could somehow use the still grow. And of course, fresh water supplies are limited, resources, water is limited, but you still have the oceans full of salt water, so they'll have an unlimited supply of water and food and crops, and that would give Inazagi the head, they become the most dominant force in the world with that power. So they're trying to locate a gentleman by the name of Sanjay Maharaj, who's the scientist, and they have located a person who knows his whereabouts. The problem is they know the person won't talk under normal means, in that they won't be able to extract the information out of him, even if they can get to him. So they want to be able to get the right information, and they want to do this correct. So with the promise that Ben had made in the previous episode about getting this mind reading technology, functioning, so that they can use it to extract this valuable information, Ben had made promises that this technology would be ready. And this technology is called the Everclear machine. It's a mind reading machine. And so Ben is pretty much sticking to that story that you know, basically it's going to be ready and they will be able to use it on this person whose name is Philip Brill, and he's the person who knows where the scientist Sanjay Maharaj is, who can give them the information, you know, about this technology to make these plants grow with salt water. So their plan is going to either be to convert him or, you know, maybe get rid of him. So in the next scene, or what's happening next here, is Ben is going to test the machine on himself, and he brings Hendricks in to help him, and of course Hendricks being the person from you know, who's got him into the green zone. And in order for him to test the machine to see if it's working, he has Hendrick ask him you know, questions, deep questions about you know, who he is, to test the machine. And the information comes out through the test that Ben has killed Roger, and of course Hendricks is very upset about this because he knows the extreme danger Ben has now put them both in, as they're looking for Roger to try to find out you know, if Roger you know, what's going on with Roger, why hasn't he reported in. And of course we know Ben has already killed Roger. He put him in his self-driving car and had him go to the border. But we get a scene where two people at the border with metal detectors looking for you know, items of value actually find Roger. And you know, then it's, you know, pretty much, you know, known that, or going to soon be known that Roger has not defected, but he was murdered. As at this point, Ben last week had set up a plan where Roger, where it would appear that Roger had defected, and so that was only going to buy them some time, you know. But of his body was discovered, and now it's a countdown. It's only a matter of time before, you know, it's discovered that Roger wasn't a defector, but Roger was actually murdered. And so they find out, as Ben is tested by Hendricks on the machine, it is found out that the machine can work, and now at this point, it can be used on Philip Brill, and you know, used in order to try to obtain the information as to if where Sanjay Maharaj is located. So, you know, as we get to the next scene, the Inazagi representative who knows where Sanjay Maharaj is actually kidnapped by Julian and his security team. And how they're able to locate and kidnap him is because they've been doing some research, and they found out that Philip Brill is actually an alcoholic. And he's trying to get treatment, but he knows if Inazagi finds out he's an alcoholic, that, you know, he will be his contract will be terminated or he'll be dismissed. So what he's trying to do, what Philip Brill is trying to do, is he tries to go into the red zone. And as he enters into the red zone, they have these AA meetings where he can try to get help and deal with his problem. But unbeknownst to him, the Spiegel Corporation has been monitoring his activity. So Julian moves in with his team, and right after his meeting, he's extracted and he's brought, back to the Spiegel Corporation. And so he basically lets them know he's not going to talk, that, there's nothing they're going to be able to do to get him to talk. However, Julian informs him that he doesn't have to, as they now have the ever clear machine working that can read his mind. And Philip Brill believes the technology is not usable. He believes that they're just trying to bluff him. He doesn't believe it works, but it actually does work. And as Ben is trying to extract the information from him, they have cleverly found a way, or Philip Brill has cleverly found a way to hide the information in his mind through use of images. But Ben, being the sharp and intelligent person he is, he's able to understand that the brain can use images as a way to store information. And so as this white stallion appears, in his mind, as there's a screen behind him, and your thoughts are projected as images. But after Ben sees this horse, after he's specifically asking him questions about the location of where Sanjay Maharaj is, he's able to determine that through seeing this horse running around, that there's actually a place, and I'm not exactly sure. I think I forgot the name, but I believe it was called something like White Horse something, and it's some location around Canada or something like that, where Ben's able to narrow it down and figure out where Sanjay Maharaj's location is. So Julian has, other things to take care as well. He's to discover what happened to Roger, and he finds Roger's keyhole. And the keyhole that Roger had stole from Ben is what Julian finds. And of course, by him finding that keyhole, he's able to also find videos of Elena on it. So at this point, Julian is wondering, who is this person? Why is she on this keyhole? What was going on? Did she have something to do with Roger and why he's missing or defected? And so Julian then contacts Roger's father, and Roger's father admits that the girl in the video, after Julian asks him if he knows anything about her, he admits that he set up a meeting between Elena and Roger. And so Julian wants to know what this meeting was about, what they talked about. So Julian actually brings in Elena for an interview to get questions and information about what's going on. But interesting enough, before Julian walks into the interview, he lets Ben know that he needs to go ahead and extract this information from Philip Brill and get the information they need. And as Ben was in the process of obtaining that information, he found out that Julian was actually headed to a meeting with someone from beyond the 40th floor. And Ben is able to put it together that, because they're investigating what happened to Roger, somebody's coming down from the 40th floor. He already knows it's Elena. So whilst Elena is being interrogated, and this was a very interesting scene, because whilst Elena was being interrogated, Ben interrupts Julian, to let him know about the success and the information of the Everclear machine, and he interrupts it right before Elena can give out key information and key details that would make it possible for Julian to narrow it down that Ben's involved in this situation, because she knows Roger had been asking about a person by the name of Ben Larson. So if she were to repeat that information, Julian would then know Ben is at the center of this, and that he's involved, and that he's created this inside job. But as Ben interrupts for the first time in the series, Elena and Ben are able to make contact, but Elena, being sharp just like Ben, she figures out that Ben is actually Aaron, and that he's trying to keep that a secret. So as Julian is now asking Elena who's Ben Larson, or rather what did Roger have a conversation about, what did Roger want, and who did he ask about, Elena is able to then move it to, oh, he asked about Elizabeth Krause, the CEO. And, you know, at the point she makes that statement, you're kind of not sure if this is just she's made the story up to throw Julian off, or if it's true that Elizabeth has been having some type of engagement, whether it be sexual or romantic, with Elena. And in this future, in the how these executives use these these escorts, these high-end escorts, and how the company views this as a reward system and a valuable resource, and you're just not sure if Elena is telling the truth or not. Like, it's possible that at the same time Elizabeth and Elena has actually crossed paths and interacted, or Elena's just been sharp enough to divert Julian over to, or throw him off that, what's going on with Ben. So, very, very interesting, what's going to come of that, and what's going to happen with that. So, as we move on to the next scene, we get Julian here, and we get to meet Julian's wife. And, the thing about Julian and his family, Julian being in the position he's in where, he can destroy your life, it makes it very difficult for people to trust Julian and to be comfortable around Julian and his entire family, because they know if they're around Julian and his family, anything that they say is back to Julian, and Julian's going to be basically, in a lot of trouble. So, we find out that Julian's wife, she can't get, other people in the community to play with their children, to hang out with them, because, as we've seen in this future and how these corporations operate, there's a very early indoctrination of children and in society as a whole. So these children, if they see something inappropriate, like say for instance they're on a play date, Julian's children are on a play date with someone else's children in the community. If they see something inappropriate in that family, they'll go back. They can go back, or they are under obligation legally to go back and tell Julian, what's going on. So nobody wants to touch Julian and his family, so they're very isolated. But as you get from the scene, they really don't care. They really just care about their own family and their own well-being. And so they're, that's not really a problem for them. But they kind of just go through the, the motion of, if that's, something that, they want to participate in. And we get a little bit about Laura, as well. in this episode, because what's happened is Laura, as we seen left off from last week's episode, Laura finally built up the courage to go over to the red zone after her assault for the first time to help treat the ailing young woman who she had been trying to help, who had appendicitis from the previous episodes. And when she arrives there, she's helping the child recover, and she's trying to leave enough antibiotics and medicine so that when she leaves, her maid, who basically got her involved and let her know what was going on, her maid from the red zone, starts to understand that, hey, you're leaving all this antibiotics and treatment and instructions because you don't plan on coming back, do you? And so Laura, is pretty much not able to come back because she's still experiencing, post-traumatic stress from her incident. And by her being in there, it's a trigger. It's making it even worse. So as Laura's trying to get back now to the green zone, they're actually interrupted by a gang leader. And the gang leader, lets them know that that's his block. Nothing happens on that block but him. And in that same scene, the neighborhood is just surrounded. At the door, it's a lot of sick people who know that Laura's there to help. Information just gets out really quick, I guess, because maybe they can see when a person enters into the red zone and they know when something different is happening. So maybe they see Laura when she arrives. However they get the information, the whole community, an entire community of sick people showed up for medical help. And it does appear that Laura wants to help them, or she's going to try. But this gang leader steps in and he grabs her and he kidnaps her. And at first I'm basically just going, oh my goodness, here it is again. She's, back in a bad situation, kidnapped and probably about to be assaulted once again from someone from the red zone. And so it's looking pretty bad for Laura. She's trying to go into the red zone and help needy people. But this time it's a twist to it. The gang leader, doesn't actually want to assault Laura or even stop what she's doing. He's basically in a situation where he's come in and he's fought to gain power and control over this community and neighborhood. But now he wants to do something we've seen happen many times in countries where dictators rise up and military coups happen, and there's a lot of violence and destruction in the beginning. But as these groups and these factions gain power, they then later wish to create a healthy and peaceful, or a stable, rather, a more stable environment. And this is what this gang leader wants to do. And he's played by an interesting guy. I can't remember his name, but he played Helio Agathon on the Battlestar Galactica series. If some of you Battlestar Galactica fans probably remember him. He's the person who married the Cylon and had the child from the Cylon. And he actually played in these TV series, Dollhouse. So he plays the gang leader, but what he wants to do, he wants to provide a facility for Laura to actually open up a clinic, to run a clinic, but to do it in his name so that he gets the credit for being this type of benevolent, leader. And so it's a kind of a good plan, and Laura seems to be on board with it. She seems to be going to, basically jump on board with this idea. And now, so we're probably going to see a lot of Laura actually in the red zone, and she's going to try to run this clinic and help these people who need medical attention very badly. So we then move on to what's happening with Theo. And Theo was still very much, putting on his cage matches and with Terrence, the crime syndicate, who he's under at this point. But his next fight that they have scheduled is going to be the most challenging of them all, because he's basically going to be fighting this super enhanced fighter, that's being put on by person that Terrence knows, who has put a lot of time, energy, and resources in this super fighter. And as they describe him and as they explain it, he is as close to perfection, as a person can get in the ring. And you can see him, his training, processes and his sessions, and you can just see that this guy is, he's just like they say, he's almost as close to perfect as, as they can get. And he's just doing these phenomenal feats. And as Theo is watching him do this, Theo's basically, hey, there's no way in the world I can beat this guy. He's super enhanced. He's, genetically altered. He's eating well and this and that. So Terrence is trying to, I think Terrence kind of knows that, this guy is a great fighter. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to get the person who's over the super enhanced fighter to give him 1% of the earnings that this guy's going to make, from from his fighter. And so he's looking at, so it's basically like a situation where you get a percentage of my fighter, I get a percentage of your fighter, and it's kind of like this partnership thing. But the partner who's over the potential partner who's over the super fighter, he's like, well, let me check out your guy. And as he's checking out Theo, he's looking at Theo. It's this very clinical check, where he's looking through his mouth, he's checking out, and he's very good at this. So he's able to see that Theo has a vitamin D deficiency, I believe. And so he's basically come to the conclusion that Theo isn't anywhere near worth what his fighter is, and that partnership can never work that way. That Theo is clearly an inferior fighter to this guy. But Terrence kind of has a card up his sleeve. He's had a chemist experimenting on this drug, and they basically it seems to be inhaled. And so right before the fight, they tell Theo to just be calm. They got everything under control. They're going to give him this new drug, this new super drug they have, and they give it to Theo. And in the beginning, as Theo is fighting the super fighter, the super enhanced fighter, it seems to not be working. The super enhanced fighter is really, going to town on him. He's really beating him down. And so Theo basically, it starts to kick in. I guess after it takes a bit, maybe as your adrenaline starts up, it triggers this thing. But when it gets going, it turns Theo into an animal, almost literally. And he just starts beating this guy almost to death. And then he's almost turned into an animal. He actually starts to chew on this guy's face. And they have to stop the fight, and it's crazy. And so the guy who's over the super fighter, he's like, just stop the fight, stop it. And then Terrence comes over and lets him know that he needs to reconsider that partnership, that, now is more in favor of Terrence, that he needs to get the bigger percentage and a better percentage of, in the partnership. But there are bad side effects to this, using this drug. And Theo can't come off this drug now. You know, he's going crazy and he's going insane, and they're taking several people to hold him down. And although he's won the fight, they can't, you know, seem to get this, you know, the side effects and this, you know, off of him, and that this drug is still in him and he's still reacting. And so one method that they use to calm you down, I guess, is through sex. And so they use this woman to come in, you know, she looks like some type of escort or something, and she comes in and she's going to use through you know, sexual things. She's going to be able to calm Theo down, but the problem is, you know, as we know from earlier episodes, Theo is not heterosexual, but Theo is actually homosexual. And so this is devastating to Theo because they're using a woman in order to, you know, to calm him down. And he's like, no, no, please don't do this. But they have to, you know, this is the method they use. And so, you know, of course, this has a very negative effect on Theo. And finally, you know, in the final scene as we go back here to, you know, with Ben and the Everclear machine, Julian has deduced after, you know, he finds Roger's dead, that Roger didn't defect. So that means that there is somebody who can benefit from this. It's not on the outside, but the inside. And so the only person that he's starting to see that has any benefit to gain in Roger's death and Chad's, and as Julian goes back to what happened with Chad, you know, the boss whose position there now after, or Ben and Roger was after. Ben is the only person left, you know, who can benefit from everything that's happened inside the company so far. So clearly there's motive. There's just not proof. And, you know, it's also that Ben's the son-in-law of the CEO. So, you know, that can have some backlashes, and I think Elizabeth's concerned about that. But as Julian has now really focused on it, has to be an inside job. He wants Elizabeth to basically grant him access to be able to use the Everclear machine on every person in the company so that he can extract, now he can extract the information from. And the kind of funny thing about it, now that the Everclear machine is working, I'm wondering now, will that make you a bit obsolete? Because there will really be no reason for, you know, I mean, they can obtain information, you know, this easy, but I guess he could still be the head of the security. But I mean, as far as him just, you know, having to extract things, you know, specifically how they used to do it. Now they have this technology that can do it. So, you know, Ben, being the smart person he is, Ben has figured out that this machine that he's created is going to be his Achilles heel. It's going to eventually be turned against him at some point. So Ben figures this out. So Ben's going to try to deactivate, turn the machine off, you know, make it so that it can't now be used on, you know, on him. But Ben is just too late. He's too late. Julian was a step ahead of him on this one. He's already locked it down and made it so that it can't be deactivated and it can't be used by him either. So Julian, so at this point, Ben knows it's just a matter of time now. You know, he's going to be the first person they use the Everclear machine on, as he's the most, you know, he's the person with the most motive. So Ben knows his back is up against the wall now. So, you know, as we learn to understand that Ben's plan now is going to be to get Hendrix back, to wipe his mind clean. Because as a scene I did miss, I missed the scene where actually Ben does use the when he uses the Everclear machine on Philip Brill, the person who they used the Everclear machine on, or the company did, to find out where Sanjay Maharaj was. Ben actually lets Philip know that he's trying to leave the company with another person, which, you know, we know now that that's him and Elena trying to escape the green zone. So he wants Philip Brill to help him when he escapes. And but Philip Brill is basically saying he won't help him. So what Ben's doing is he's extracting this information, but after he finds out that he actually erases Philip Brill's, you know, well, the reason they arrest Philip Brill's mind is so that they can put him back into play in the Inazagi Corporation without Inazagi knowing that he's even been kidnapped at this point. So they have to erase his mind. But Ben does, you know, set up that he needs him to help him, you know, to escape out of the green zone. So Ben's next plan, and knowing he could do that and he can erase minds, is to have Hendrix erase his entire knowledge of himself as Aaron. So this is very interesting because I don't know what the total ramifications of this is going to end up being, because without his memory of Aaron, he won't even know who Elena is. You know, everything he felt and known about her, he's going to lose that as well. So, but it's the only play he has at this point because Julian is on him. It's only a matter of time now before he's found out. So he has to erase everything he knows about his former life. Now, in doing that, he will also erase Elena. So that's my question, you know, left to me in this week's episode, or the question asked: after he does that, will he remain in this state, and will it only be about him and Laura now as they move on, or will he concoct a plan to where he can somehow have his memory restored? Because I'm not sure they can restore the memories. This may be you know, this may be a total mind sweep. I don't know if it can be, restored. But then also, we know that Elena is aware of him now. So would it then be that maybe Elena is able to convince him of who he actually is and where he's actually from and what they were actually meant to each other? So that's all very interesting. You know, what's going to happen as we move into our last 3 episodes. And, you know, like I said, you know, I'm very much anticipating, how the season's going to end. And would like to hear you guys' thoughts and comments about Incorporated. Like I said, I think it's very underrated. You know, this show is very much on par and with a great science fiction show. It's also shot high quality, like it should be at the movies or something, or on the silver screen. But anyway, guys, stay tuned for next week's review on Incorporated. I hope you're enjoying it still, and comment, let us know if you are. Let us know what your predictions are. What do you think? How do you think this is going to end for Ben, and at the end of the season? And make sure to like and subscribe. And we hope to see you again next week, same time. Take care, guys.